The morning air was thick with smoke and fear. From the shattered mud of the Western Front, a strange roar echoed, mechanical, unearthly. Soldiers froze. Through the haze, something monstrous rolled forward, steel plating, churning tracks, and the grinding pulse of an engine that sounded like thunder. Men who had survived years of artillery and gas attacks stared in disbelief. For the first time in history, machines were advancing where men once crawled, and the world was about to witness a new kind of warfare. They called it the tank, a word whispered like a secret in the ranks. To the men of 1917, it looked less like a weapon and more like a creature torn from nightmares. But its arrival at the Battle of Cambrai would change everything. The age of steel had begun. Before we dive deeper into this remarkable story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss our cinematic deep dives into the moments that reshaped history. By late 1917, the Western Front had become a graveyard of progress. Years of trench warfare had swallowed millions of lives for mere yards of mud. The machine gun ruled the battlefield. Barbed wire strangled every advance. Artillery thundered day and night, tearing the earth apart until it resembled the surface of another planet. Commanders on both sides were desperate for a miracle, something to break the stalemate that had turned Europe into a wound that would not heal. That miracle began in secret. Deep within workshops across Britain, a group of engineers, officers, and dreamers conspired to create something new, a weapon unlike anything that had existed before. Among them was Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Swinton, a man who saw the future in gears and engines. Working with Sir Albert Stern and the Land Ships Committee, they envisioned a machine capable of crossing trenches, crushing barbed wire, and carrying soldiers safely through hell itself. The first prototypes were crude, lumbering metal beasts that rattled, smoked, and overheated, but they were alive. The British disguised the project under the name water tanks for Mesopotamia, hoping to confuse spies and the press. And so, the name tank stuck a humble cover name for a weapon that would reshape modern warfare. Their first appearance in 1916, at the Battle of the Somme, had been disappointing. Many broke down before even reaching the front. Others sank into the mud. Soldiers joked that they were mechanical coffins. But behind those failures, a quiet revolution was brewing. The British learned. They adapted. The next generation of tanks would be stronger, faster, and far deadlier. And then came Cambrai. On November 20th, 1917, it was cold, silent, and grey. The British Army prepared something no one expected, a surprise attack without the usual days of artillery bombardment. Instead, they relied on secrecy and shock. In the early hours before dawn, 476 tanks rumbled to life. The sound rolled across the front like distant thunder. When they moved, the ground trembled. Steel monsters crushed the barbed wire, rolled over enemy trenches, and led the charge across no man's land. German defenders panicked. Machine gun nests were flattened. Strong points were shattered. The British, who had once measured progress in inches, now advanced in miles. For a moment, victory seemed within reach, but the triumph was short-lived. The tanks, for all their power, were fragile giants. Their engines overheated, their treads broke, and the mud once again became their enemy. Communication between tank crews and infantry collapsed. German artillery found its range. What had begun as a bold breakthrough ended in exhaustion and retreat. Still, Cambrai had proven something vital. The tank was no longer a fantasy. It was a weapon of the future, As winter set in, both sides began to study this strange new force. Germany, impressed and alarmed, began building its own version, the A7V, an armored steel box that crawled across the battlefield on thick tracks. It was slow, awkward, and terrifying to behold. The Allies, meanwhile, refined their designs, leading to the Mark V, a tank that could turn, maneuver, and move with greater speed. The age of experimentation had ended. The race for armored dominance had begun. Then, in April 1918, history witnessed something that no human had ever seen before, a duel of machines. At Villers-Bretonneux in northern France, 3 British Mark IV tanks clashed with 3 German A7Vs. The battlefield was chaos, mud, smoke, and the stench of cordite. Inside each tank, the crew fought blind. Vision slits filled with dust and fire. The noise was unbearable, gears grinding, bullets hammering against armor, engines howling in agony. When it was over, 2 German tanks lay burning. The survivors stumbled out, half deaf and gasping for air. Realizing they had witnessed the dawn of a new kind of war, one where men no longer fought each other face to face, but through the power of machines. By summer 1918, the Allies had perfected the art of combined arms warfare, tanks, infantry, and aircraft working together in harmony. The Battle of Amiens became the ultimate test. Hundreds of tanks rolled forward through fog, flanked by biplanes and waves of infantry. The German lines, stretched and demoralized, began to crumble. It was the first time the Allies felt the tide truly turning in their favor. Each rumbling advance carried both awe and terror. Soldiers who marched beside the tanks described them as both protectors and monsters. Inside, the crews endured suffocating heat and choking fumes, often with no way to escape if fire broke out. The air was thick with oil and fear, but they pressed on because every yard gained meant one step closer to ending the nightmare. Behind the mechanical triumph lay a profound human cost. Every innovation came at the price of lives, mechanics, drivers, and engineers who tested designs under enemy fire. Yet, these men were not forgotten. They were the pioneers of a new military era, forging a bridge between the old world of cavalry and the modern world of machines. When the guns finally fell silent on November 11th, 1918, Europe exhaled for the first time in 4 years. The old empires, Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, were in ruins. The world stood on the edge of a new age. Amid the rubble, one invention stood as a grim monument to human ingenuity: the tank. It had not single-handedly won the war, but it had proven that industrial power could shape the destiny of nations. In the aftermath, military thinkers everywhere took notice. The lessons of Cambrai and Amiens became sacred texts for the generals of the next generation. A young German officer named Heinz Guderian studied those reports obsessively, imagining fast-moving, armored formations that could crush an enemy before they could react. 2 decades later, his ideas would define the Blitzkrieg, and the tanks of the next war would move faster, strike harder, and change the world once again. Looking back, it's astonishing to realize how quickly the idea evolved from rickety prototypes, covered in rivets, to sleek armored beasts that dominated the 20th century. The tank was born from desperation, but grew into a symbol of unstoppable force. Even now, more than a century later, the image of a tank rolling through the fog still carries that same haunting energy it did in 1917. The roar of its engine echoes across time, a reminder of when humankind fought first learned to wage war not with courage alone, but with the relentless power of steel and fire. If you enjoyed this journey through the birth of mechanized warfare, make sure to subscribe and press the bell icon so you never miss the stories that shaped our world, one battlefield at a time.